Okay, here we go in Project Soulcatcher Part 4 read through. Everybody, I hope y'all doing okay. David, I'm a TI, unfortunately. Heavy V2K, heavy shocks and vibrations lately, heavy fatigue. I have been doing garlic, and it has been helping my energy, but sticking to it, I just need to keep sticking to it. And I think it's definitely helping my energy. Now, I'm still getting hit and stuff like that. Multitasking and hand pan music's helping my V2K, uh, but still major amount of torture, fatigue in my body. I have to force myself to exercise or do anything. So it's been pretty messed up last week. Haven't felt like doing much of anything. Don't forget, if you're interested in getting an interview, go to hollyspunk@gmail.com and we'll set you up for an interview to tell your story. We welcome not only TIs, satanic ritual abuse, MK Ultra survivors, all that. Um, so anyway, here we go. Part 4 read through of Project Soulcatcher. And we're starting with handles, handlers, and proxies. Handles in computer science is an indirection. Handlers are used in the NSA and CIA as an indirection to controlling the agent. They are used for many reasons, including not putting the handler manager in danger for plausible deniability and for plausible deniability. When starting wars and disruption, proxy agent provocateurs are used. Pleasure/pain principles. We exist because the universe is dreaming. In general, when engineering intelligent systems, pleasure and reward serve as a motivator and director, while punishment and pain serve as the error correcting function and mitigator. An intelligent system, as we humans understand it, which is durable, stable, and converges quickly, cannot be created without these concepts, either in animal or artifactual context. This is the study of cybernetics. Another aspect of the technology that is not well documented or discussed is the other side of the coin. Pain is well defined and easy to create. Most of the human sensory function is to alert the brain that something's wrong. Pleasure is more abstract and complicated in the realm of the brain signal inductions and far more state dependent in terms of how sensory stimuli would be in- interpreted as pleasure. Apathy and lack of pain seem to be perceived as a sort of pleasure because no corrective function is needed. Addictive pathways are often described as pleasure reward system which can spiral out of control. There are positive feedback pathways where negative control feedback systems are no longer participating. Biocommunication technology can amplify addictive pathways, but it does not seem to amplify the perceived pleasure according to the studies of the government research projects. This is useful for silent assassinations, where years are the order of the magnitude of time desired for the target's early termination through amplified self-destructive urges and behaviors like smoking and alcoholism. Strangely, the emotion of love is not purely composed of pleasure, but it follows the pattern of addiction. So the pathway of love can be amplified to an unhealthy, obsessive level comparable intensity to a strong drug addiction. This is the emotional mechanism used to create some of the most successfully programmed assassins. Laughter can be induced during mind hacking. Laughter can also be a kind of pleasure reflex. You ever been, they can make somebody might tell you their family died, or you might be telling you something serious about their life, and then, these handlers or proxies will make you laugh uncontrollably at the wrong time. Anyway, a sense of benevolent presence has been reported in many hacked targets. All these reflexes are abstract pleasures because they produce a secure, relaxed state. But most pleasure comes from complex emotional interactions with higher order concepts, such as having a puppy lick your face or completing a difficult task well. These kinds of pleasures are difficult to capture and replay into the same or other minds. The sensation of a wet face from a dog's tongue can be captured by the system and replayed, but without having the imagery and belief that another conscious entity is causing the wet sensation on the cheek, the induced sensory pathway perceptions fail to create the pleasurable emotions. Another extreme example of the difficulty of the current mind hacking systems have with using pleasure as a behavior modification tactic, which most creatures consider to be the most pleasurable moment of organism. A large number of hack targets report experimentation with forcing organisms, especially at inappropriate times, such as while praying in church. Instead of it feeling pleasurable, it turns out to induce the opposite feeling of being violated. Simply because of the context of the induced sensation, this pleasure pathway is reduced to a negative emotional response, even though the body will go through the same conclusive reactions. And I think he meant orgasm there. It says organism, though. How can one quantitatively measure happiness and misery? Can money buy happiness? There are age-old questions that can finally be answered by these new technologies. Defining a complex happiness in itself is a difficult task, like defining IQ. When just using a survey, money buys happiness over extreme poverty. But as the income increases over severe poverty, the happiness measurement does not. Similarly, with IQ, income potential increases up to about 130 IQ, but then falls off with IQ scores above that metric threshold on average. What is pleasure? Many have defined it as being in harmony with one's environment, where no new learning needs to take place. Is happiness the same thing as pleasure? Behavior modification experiments by the CIA use these age-old principles. Maslow's antiquated hierarchy of needs, and you see you got self-actualization, morality, creativity, spontaneity, problem solving, lack of prejudice, esteem, self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others. And it's going down a pyramid. Love, belonging, friendship, family, sexual intimacy, safety, security, body, employment, resources, morality, the family, health, property, and physiological, breathing, food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis, excretion. Author's note: the dark side of behavior modifications in humans is not a new science. There are frameworks created by B. F. Skinner and E. O. Wilson from Harvard, but the understanding is rediscovered by every child. For example, the FBI arrested an investment banker partner who would slip a street drug called ecstasy in the drinks of potential large investors in order to alter their decision-making process. The CIA had a chemical division called TSS who was supposed to develop drugs for various purposes such as memory blocking, ease hypnosis, and fall in love with no come down. They called their armory with drugs in the 1950s tricks with liquids and solids. Others have rediscovered the CIA's efforts and used them for personal gain. One CIA director of a foreign country used the drugs for sex while videotaping his 15 discovered victims in 2008. Coca-Cola Company used cocaine in the early 1900s in their soft drink to make their workers and consumers addicted, and thereby work harder in the vicious loop. In Afghanistan, sweatshops get their workers addicted to opium as to make them work harder for more of the drug. Later in the book, the reader will learn more about negative and positive feedback loops that go awry. Even positive reinforcement of behavior can be used in negative contexts. Normally, people think of torture and interrogation, which uses the negative side of behavior modification. However, many sophisticated diabolical people use the CIA's methods. By putting small doses of addictive substances in food or even gaseous forms, the non-consensual person will become addicted to the companionship of the individual, mistaking it for love. The FBI prosecuted an investment banker for using ecstasy, a street drug, to seduce clients into investing by feeling good. Hacking the variables of belief systems. We start this section of cultural beliefs by using an electronic example to show how sensors can be purposely misled. Then we will show how this embodies human senses and their beliefs. Ghosting the sensor systems. An example of ghosting and misleading detection systems are simple. Flares to divert missiles called angel fire. The same theme appears in biological sensors, blinding weapons, and dazzlers. When talking about electronics and computers, ghosts are echoes and reflection in a signal like one often sees in a broadcast television station. Other sensors can have ghosts from unintentional electrical crosstalk or possible radio frequency interference. This is the ghost in the machine. Other pieces of software that zombify or put a host machine under remote control are also sometimes called ghost. One of the most written about capabilities that interest the military is the ability to alter a person's perception of their senses. This is called ghosting because false images or ghosts can be created in their minds. The spooks, slang for CIA agents, used haunted house scripts in the late 60s and 70s, mostly while testing these techniques and equipment. Feelings of hot, cold, a present, false visual images, imagined sound with depth are all described in the Direct Energy Director of the Air Force's Personnel Effects Program. All capabilities perfectly coincide with hauntings that people have had experienced and described in detail. It doesn't take a genius to infer the connection. Cloaking and stealth technology. Stealth technologies are in big demand at the Pentagon, from airplanes, submarines, missiles, to personnel. A microwave cloaking device created using artificial materials called metamaterials that manipulate light in a bizarre and startling ways. The cloak is made of copper rings and wires patterned on the sheets of fiberglass composite. The microwaves come in and are swept around the cloak and reconstructed on the underside while avoiding the interior region, said study team member David Smith at Duke University's Pratt School of Engineering. So it looks as if they just passed through free space. Science Daily, for the first time, physicists have devised a way to make visible light travel in the opposite direction that it normally bends while passing from one material to another, like from air through water or glass. The phenomenon is known as negative refraction and could, in principle, be used to construct optical microscopes for imaging things such as small molecules, and even to create cloaking devices for rendering objects invisible. Camouflage and cloaking technologies are nothing new for nature. Evolution has devised many ways to lower the visibilities of species or disguise them as something else. Electronic warfare jams and ghost sensors such as radar and sonic towed arrays, like an octopus squirts black ink to avoid its predators. And Iraqis use the technique of the visual decoys of cardboard tanks. This is an economic war of attrition and the cost of cardboard to missiles. Bats and dolphins use active sensing techniques in their prey and lower their signature profile like the stealth bomber and submarine designs. Evolution is intelligence at a very large time frame. Even in the spy industry, there are decoy spies. How does this relate to wireless, psychic, cybernetic warfare? How could one disguise or cloak their own brain signature? Later, one will learn how the system Christ works to read common human routines. Is it possible to continuously shapeshift the mind to avoid remote viewing of it? Cognitive behavioral mapping. Okay, key model for the process of learning and change is how thoughts and behaviors are strengthened. You see, it's got events, internal, external, automatic thoughts, expectations, appraisals, attributions, attitudes, values, and beliefs, and emotions and feelings, and so on. So, there you go. I'm going to leave that up for a minute. You got adaptive action turned on, positive thoughts, negative events, positive outcome, thoughts and behavior strengthened, turned on negative events or experience, negative or bad income, weakened behavior sets. And he's going to explain this. Historically, one of the effective means to manipulate direct cultural normalization has been architected regions. While providing social order, organized religion can be a point of attack for mind hackers. The synthetic telepathy capability of the biocommunication weapons allow for control of leaders of religions. A country dominated by religious belief systems is very vulnerable to manipulation by other groups. All that's required is the use of the voice of God weapon on an uneducated target of these technologies in order to make them believe they were conversing with God or angels. Since the feeling of direct neural linking is so foreign to most people, they naturally must attribute the experience as supernatural or to advanced alien technology. Far more specific beliefs can be hacked, but as practiced by mind hackers, most of all induced beliefs fall under false assumption and local error amplification, which ultimately leads to delusional thinking, or more precisely, articulated erroneous thinking. This is why psychologists who study delusional thinking observe that the subject's thinking is complex, often has supporting evidence difficult to talk out of, but ultimately leads to extreme and possibly faulty conclusions. To best understand this kind of hack, a more abstract decision tree model should be used. The diagrams below show two decision trees where every node has a confidence and expected outcome. John Nash was made famous by introducing the field of game theory, frequently used in military and business strategy, which has its roots in decision trees. Simply by altering either the confidence values or the expected outcome of any decision node in the tree, the final conclusion can be significantly altered. Precise neuron amplification is like increasing confidence in level in the node in the decision tree. Use of the auditory and subliminal channels can change the expected outcome of a node. Hacking just these two types of variables can drastically alter beliefs and decisions, thereby controlling the actionable behavior of a target. When you see what it's got, mass media coverage, numbers of testimony, Pentagon validation, other country testimonies, credibility of testimonies, published papers. Believe people are lying, people are mentally ill, it is impossible. So these are all factors of believability. From the counterintelligence community point of view, all factors in the first chart lead to believability are reduced in the public domain. The goal of targeted individuals is to increase them until a mass believability is obtained. Assuming the observer reaches the belief state, there are greater hurdles to make them take action. And that make them think, will involvement danger me? Will I be considered mentally ill by my friends? Why should I care? I don't want to be first. What can I do? Stay out of it. Write to senators, protest, start a revolution. Additionally, humans are irrational creatures. Game theory, and if you want to know about hyper games, scroll down through my videos before my interview. I have a couple of videos where I can explain hyper game theory, what he's talking about, and how target individuals go through hyper game theory and how it's used on target individuals. Additionally, humans are irrational creatures. Game theory accuracy requires rational actors. In the previous decision analysis, it's a linear model and doesn't take into account the lemming effect, the sheeple effect, nor irrational factors such as what belief makes them feel better. Santa Claus is a charitable man. A supreme being is watching out for me so I don't have to worry so much, and he will stop them. By removing a culture's collective memory of events, such as by censorship of books or skewed public history education, or increasing the confidence ratios through repetition presentation in a trusted information medium, entire social beliefs can be shifted in a decade and even overnight. While this is more domain of psychological information warfare tactics, the use of mind hacking the greatest people of influence in a culture can accelerate the desired change of the whole. The process of finding the people of greatest influence in an organization is called influence mapping. Physical and no-touch torture are used for many applications. One of the most prominent uses by the CIA is to probe what that person will do for revenge and then plunge in those holes. This is how they brainstorm creative attacks on U.S. by torturing innocent people, by finding all possible counterattacks by highly motivated, smart, creative individuals. The CIA and DoD has been able to put up defenses against them before they happen, even including how the torture victims can find justice. This includes plugging information outlets to the public. Information is very tightly regulated despite First Amendment rights. There are many tactics used for subversive censorship by the CIA. Thousands of mind hack projects of DoD have never found a way to make the public full aware and understand their plight so that they might get help from the countrymen. This process of decision tree modeling has assured that every possible mass information source, and more importantly, the belief systems themselves have been controlled. Most importantly, they focused on strategic domestic deception for manipulating belief systems of the public and flow of mass information to the mainstream. The internet has proven the most difficult to regulate through the various tactic and explicit control mechanisms. So to stop an individual from being heard, artificial intelligent algorithms have been devised to flood specific internet keywords with noise. Informational noise can be just inaccuracies, misinformation, or deception, disinformation, contrived to make it difficult for a researcher to find the grains of truth. The AI natural language story generators have become quite popular in the last couple of decades to counter the improved search engines companies' algorithms. Philosophy of reality versus belief systems. It is important to correct a common philosophical misunderstanding in regards to manipulating the belief systems of an individual or at the cultural level. That is, many believe reality is what you make of it, or there are multiple realities, or it's often expressed you can create your own reality. This popular illogical viewpoint arises because people subjectively have experienced intense shifting of conscious perspective in their lives. However, reality is an immutable event by definition, the conscious intelligence being limited in complexity, size, and its access to accurate data can only hope to approximately model reality. Models are inherently approximations to one truth, reality. This is a calculable, mathematical absolute. Arguments about the practical implementation of how and who represent the best approximation to the truth in reality are valid, however. In a sporting event, Modeling accuracy is determined by performance. The golfer that hits the ball on average the most accurately is modeling the physics of golfing closest to reality. And except for educators, from common experience, it can be generally said that someone who manipulates another intelligent being creates more errors and moves it further from reality, usually for their own benefit. Advertising is almost all based on simple belief system manipulation. This difference can be exemplified with examples in history of how the popular beliefs have very much diverged from the reality. The Catholic Church denounced Galileo's gravity equations for 300 years. The earth was presumed flat. Time, space were flat until Einstein's work. And wireless hacking in humans' minds is 30 years away. Right. It's already been here. It's been here. These are some of the greatest blunders of collective beliefs in the last couple centuries. Obtaining the state of ignorance for an individual, a culture, is easier task. Education takes energy and resource to instill enlightenment, so it's more highly ordered state of existence. So when I said in wireless hacking of the minds is 30 years away, that was an exaggeration. He's exaggerating there. He's saying it's been around for years. Faulty logic. Human beings have been built in faulty logic. They develop over a lifetime because these errors of cognition are so common. There may be underlying genetic reasons. Many industries have been born from taking advantage of these errors of reasoning, such as the gambling industry. The majority of logical errors come in the form of tautologies and conditionals. The human mind has its own symbolic logic and equivalent of neural network patterns. We're going to look at faulty assumptions and faulty correlations from the viewpoints of from subjective faulty logic and observer faulty logic. Let's use real-life examples from interviews to understand how faulty conclusions arise. These examples will illustrate faulty cause and effect correlations. Then we will discuss the faulty assumptions by subjective and observer points of view. Case example 1. Every time my neighbors come home, I get tortured with invisible pain rays. My neighbors are doing it with some equipment they have. Faulty assumption. The signal's coming from nearby and nobody else is trying to make the target draw a faulty conclusion. Case example 2. Many times when I eat, someone poisons my food and I feel sick. There must be agents everywhere I go, adding poison. Assumption. The sickness is caused by the food and not an external signal. Case example 3. When my cat, named Schrodinger, comes into the room, I get hurt by invisible pain rays. They must be coming from my cat. Assumption. The cat is emitting something. The target dressed her cat in tinfoil. Faulty correlations is how the game's played. Once she learned the methods of psychic warfare deceptions, she undressed her cat. Case example 4. Surely, since the media will report a cat rescue from a tree, they will report my torture. Or conversely, sure, the United States doesn't have torture weapons like this, or we would see it in the news. Assumption. Similarly, how all propaganda works, because we don't see dead bodies on the news, people don't die in wars. Case example 5. If electromagnetic fields could cause pain to a single individual, I would feel it standing right next to them. Assumption. Human brains, bodies, and nervous system can't be tuned into like a cellular phone. And once again, that's false. Discussion question. What's wrong with the assumptions and logics in each case? Analyze each exactly. In all four examples, there are several assumptions made by the person. Those assumptions are not necessarily valid. The realms of the possibilities are limited in their mind, just like assumptions made by audience when magic and illusions are performed. Example, they are generalizing with every time they are making possible faulty assumptions that invisible pain rays must be coming from somewhere nearby because it feels so intense. Example 2 and 3 have exactly the same faulty assumptions. In cognitive warfare, the strategy is to induce these faulty conclusions in the target. The easiest case to understand how these examples are created is to imagine a person with a shock collar on them. The handler trains the subject by creating some kind of pain every time some other event happens, which they monitor. The subject will naturally correlate the patterns and come to their conclusion. Also, in accordance, an uninformed observer will check the food for poisons and not find any and conclude the person's crazy for claiming such a thing. This too is a faulty assumption since the CIA has been developing ways to create malingering ailments and poisons. People assume that what they can't see can't hurt them. Example 4 has several faulty assumptions caused by information bubbles and containment. All governments find their way to alter populations' belief using news streams. One has to learn this for themselves. The DoD can order that body bags do not show up on any mainstream news for example. Example 5 is often heard from observers of target individuals. They assume humans have no differences that can be taken advantage of. They understand if you place two mobile phones next to each other, only one will ring when called, but cannot translate that logic into human torture. The goal is to make the observer and targets make faulty assumptions and conclusion. This is also called indirection. Obviously, in warfare, this has great advantage in order to get into the opposing commander's minds. Discussion questions to think about. How do you design an experiment which is hardened against an external person trying to sabotage its results with false positives and negatives? How do you isolate a multivariable adapting system? A dictionary attack. A good example of a dictionary attack is euphemisms redefining the English language in real time. George Bush did this with redefining torture for what the reasonable man would. The complexity of these techniques are often seen in politics and legal jargon used by the Ministry of Propaganda, aka DOD, CIA. We are focused on the individual attacks and not so much on the cultural wide attacks of the English language itself in this context. Associating emotions with words is another important strategy. For example, if one's brutalized while the word torture is repeated over and over again, the person will respond in seemingly irrational fashion if the word's used in common context compared to the person who never experienced torture. This essence is a Pavlov's dog effect. In some parts of the country, the word liberal has been emotionally associated with negative connotations, even though its root means freedom. There are countless other examples. A dictionary attack in the computer hacking world means something completely different. Most people use common words and proper nouns for their passwords. Automated password guessing tools use the dictionary, personal information in the combinations to scour through the possibility of passwords. This is more effective than a brute force hacking attack technique that goes letter by letter like a combination lock. Time until crack or time until decryption is an important metric in security. Purging and altering memory. The DoD is now investigating drugs that will purge memory. You can imagine how it would be used. They would seduce bright young scientists to do work for them, then erase part of their soul for national security reasons, of course. They can be trusted, but nobody else can. The investigation is focused on electromagnetic means to alter memory and perception, and not drugs that are being developed as you're reading this. Imagine if this technology was used over the entire population from birth to death. A human would not be motivated to know the truth. It would be a type of behavior modification away from curiosity about cybernetics and mind control and could be induced into the average brain pathways over a population. Memory decays generally as a function of time, or importantly, in terms of neural network theory, is a function of the amount of new stimulus it receives. The trick is to distract the mind from the repeated focus on the topic and to not allow the target to sleep for a couple days in order to prevent short-term memory to turn into long-term memory. One must always keep in mind the subjective experiences of the psychic soldier and the target while simultaneously comprehending the objective physics of the neurology. Here are the instructions given to psychic soldiers to erase short-term memory and alter previous memory of the target using cerebral cortex cloning. There will be more on this type of psychic soldier training trickery later in this book. Sudden forced change of focus using mental distractions. Less time the brain thinks about a topic, less time it will go into short and long-term memory. Memory decays generally as a function of time, or more importantly, in the terms of a neural network theory, as a function of the amount of new stimulation it receives. Overstimulate the target's brain. To alter a previous memory, trick the target in recalling the memory, then slowly morph it into another of your choice. The new memory stays in the historical recall time frame as the original memory. This is classified in the psychology community as false memory syndrome. EDM, electronic dissolution of memory. EDM is a CIA program that utilizes various electromagnetic techniques to fade memories. It involves many of the same techniques as previously discussed, but also includes dream manipulation and hypnotic states. The program is closely related to the RHIC, Remote Hypnotic Intercerebral Control. This relates to our investigation of the computer science framework of hacking computers and erasing and altering memory. Thought stream filtering and suppression. More amazingly, thought filtering and suppression can be done with this technology. Specific memory recall or even new thoughts can be suppressed. This can be useful, for example, once suppressing a nuclear scientist's thoughts to create atomic weaponry. One can think of this technique as being similar to the automated Microsoft spell check which will correct spelled words on the fly as one types or in this case as one thinks. To erase a computer's memory or filter data that comes from devices or ports is easy compared with mind hacking equivalents teachers including the teacher's editions of code that filters everything that goes into program from keyboard by putting hooks into it. Keystroke loggers use this technique to copy every key typed into a secret buffer for later transmission. Some viruses purposely try to diminish productivity of the targeted computer by introducing a keystroke error ever so often, but not so often as to be obvious. Brain bioamplification technologies all rely on the same principle that only allow energy or signals to be added to a mind. The reason for this is due to the diode effect and how ionic heated energy is transformed into accelerated directional biochemical reaction. The depolarization time in the neural groups can be phase shifted to a slightly early firing event, but on a whole, this technique is not significant enough to be used as a dampening signal generator. So, given this limitation, how can memory recall or thought pathways be suppressed if energy can't be taken out of the brain signal through electromagnetic field dampening of the neuron at the moment of synaptic neurotransmitter release? There are four approaches to get by these limitations: negative associative conditioning, accelerated depatterning, diversion, and inhibitory pathway amplification. Negative associative condition is executed by simply attaching a negative stimulus every time the recognized brain signal is played in full. This leads to what's traditionally called repression. The pain associated with a memory causes the mind to avert all recalls of it. Rape and molestation are often events that are repressed. In practice, the CIA mind hackers use rape scenarios and extreme torture when experimenting with this kind of repression. This is why people who report being abducted by aliens and experimented on say they were very often anally raped. Whether the mind programs just seem very real to them or whether the events actually occurred cannot be determined by investigators. This technique, if applied for positive applications, could save 1 million people a year by forcefully help breaking a smoking habit, for example, far more than preventing a possible nuclear explosion in a city using secret spying applications. Number two, accelerated depatterning. By amplifying all pathways in a host brain, except for the ones that are to be erased or dampened, rely on a basic neurological phenomenon called long-term potentiation. In LTP, metabolic cellular changes occur that alter synaptic growth and long-term storage. By amplifying every pathway except for those filtered, the neurons will alter themselves more quickly to both compensate for the overactive brain pathways and accelerate the degradation of other long-term memories or behavioral pathways. This is intuitive based on artificial neural network models where the most recent input data set causes a fading of the least presented data set patterns. Over time, all memory of the earlier learned patterns will be erased. Increasing the speed of brain activity and new pattern presentation will accelerate the depatterning and memory erasure processes. Diversion. Diversion is a psychological technique used by neurological weapons practitioners. Humans have a focus of attention. If the focus of attention is disrupted constantly, one can't learn or remember. The idea is during remote neural renditions, if the target says or thinks something undesirable, that their mental activity can be redirected, thereby not allow short-term memory to form. It's often called spot blanking of memory. The cloner just needs to clear their mind or think of something else very intensely to clone that into a target. Inhibitory pathway amplification. Neural circuits have both amplification and inhibitory pathways. Amplifying inhibitory pathways is the exact opposite of the majority purpose of the mind. Filtering is the function of inhibitory pathways, and recognition is the purpose of amplification pathways, although they work in conjunction. The basic idea in order to manipulate human perception involves altering these types of pathways. Memory also works with these pathways. Mapping them out has been a long-running goal of the CIA's Science and Technology Division. Improving the memory of the spies or erasing memory during an interrogation utilizes these pathways. Side note, interview with a Canadian project. Interviewee, during my mental mutilation and experimentation, they were able to make me not be able to mentally visualize people clapping. Interviewer, what do you mean? Interviewee: I mean, in my mind's eye, I could not visualize people clapping with their hands. Every time I tried to imagine people clapping, the people would miss their hands. It was so unnatural that they could alter my free mental space by injecting images of people missing their hands while trying to clap. Interviewer: do you think the experimenters could make you miss certain obvious conclusions just like forcing images of people missing claps? Interviewee: that is only the conclusion. They don't want people to think about certain ideas like a thought police. I bet they can even subvert people from asking important questions. Interviewer: what are the applications that you can think of for this technology? Interviewee: I've given that a lot of thought. It could keep enemies from rediscovering this technology or nuclear weapons. It may allow political control. It keeps people in a conservative place in a human development and allows the CIA to keep increasing their scientific advantage. Hacking decision trees. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. I'm going to stop at game theory. I'm going to go. This is the last little paragraph. The idea in mental traditional warfare is to beat the opponent with every possible move they're allowed to make by prevailing rules, resources, and constraints. Mental warfare is an exceptionally complex, multi-dimensional game of chess where the rules of the game are dynamic. This is further complicated because cognitive warfare cannot easily be separated from all other forms of offensive information warfare technologies and techniques. A few of the tools used in psychological warfare and propaganda are discussed further. Psychographic mapping, decision tree mapping, population mental chatter, and swarm theory by RAND corporations are study of information flow in the mind and population using the rules of the sheeple's effects to engineer cultural beliefs, opinions, and values. Procter and Gamble is probably the best corporation that studies this for marketing purposes. Neuromarketing is a semi-legal method in the civilian sector. Roughly every 15 years in U.S. history, a new law is passed as the civilians learn about mind-altering technologies and feel their ephemeral concept of free will is molested. Side note: a couple of authors of this book worked with MIT and Harvard undergrad students in developing pieces of technology you're reading about. Now, to inform the average person about some of the research of how to control any creature that has a nervous system, we, the undisclosed authors, will explain some of the technology the reader is legally allowed to know about. So how does it work? There are many frameworks that utilize these frailties of human psychology, but due to the author's security clearances, we can only tread gently upon this topic or risk being tortured again by the government who betrays everyone and doesn't stand for the values of the country. As the reader will learn, when psychographic mapping principles are applied to warfare techniques, the dark angel, the angel of death, reveals itself. And I'm going to go ahead and read game theory. John Nash was known for his game theory, studied intensively by both academic economics and war strategies. He eventually won a Nobel Prize for it. It's very relevant in information and cognitive warfare. The basic theory dictates probabilities of a complex game played by rational players. The idea, of course, is to win or find optimal stalemate. Each player is technically signaling to the opponent with each move. When the attacking an enemy is unexpected, asymmetric cognitive war game, the objective is to destroy the opponent no matter what rational move they make. Move towards a tactic signaling of mutual benefit, or trick them into making an obvious move which causes a loss. This takes on the adage, damned if you do, damned if you don't. These same strategic principles work in trade negotiations, war, politics, and economics. John Nash was awarded the Nobel Prize for the economic principles since no one wins warfare Nobel Peace Prize. Most innovators never got to see the full gamut of how their innovation can be used for good or evil. But imagine how it works at the individual level with weapon systems. The idea is to use the opponent's fears and weaknesses against them. Let's put this game into the context of one of the CIA program called Artichoke, a program to create plausible deniability proxy programmed assassins. The ultimate objection is to discredit the individual, use cognitive trickery to get them to kill another target, then dispose of the program assassin by local authorities at any means possible. One can't hide their guilt and fear from themselves, nor can they hide the reflex of any worries about what can be done to them. This determines the focal points of attack. The techniques to spook and rout out the fears of opposition will be discussed later in this chapter on CIA scripts. People have common fears, such as that of death, drowning, burning, pain, financial ruin, sterilization, family legacy, etc. But strangely enough, it's often the small things that create stress in the individual, such as whether they are being watched in the bathroom, or what their peers think of their appearance. Financial ruin is achieved through subjects investing in research and development to stop the torture or prove it. Additionally, of course, all passwords for bank accounts and alarm systems are known. There are ways to hide secrets from oneself, but most never figure it out, nor would they think of it due to the surprise attack. So the neurological bidirectional linking war game is unusual in the sense one can't outsmart the attacker nor oneself, especially while being neurologically scrambled and tortured. The advantage is to the surprise assailing team. So, for example, in your quest for world domination, you may want to use this capability to incite wars between countries and groups to ensure they do not form any stronger unity. This might be important in oil-based regions, for example, to ensure no monopoly is formed to control this much-needed resource. Or, for example, one might want to rid your region of undesirables, such as the weed and seed program, at the local level and instigate gang wars to occur. The techniques are the same and scaled from local to international level. Most naive watchers of television will succumb to the trickery of who the bad guys or good guys are. It's useful when programming an assassin to choose a target. The actions of the assassin will always be perceived as a lone lunatic or religious extremist by the majority of the world who are still in technological dark ages and ignorant of these weapons. The cloak of anonymity of who is behind program assassins is also a plus for plausible deniability. This is like serping the web with cookie blockers on and bouncing the server's IP address through independent servers and hiding the final destination IP addresses. However, less than a handful of countries possess the technology and reach to do the mind hacking effectively. Next week we will start at the context switching and we'll be on part 5. I hope this helped you out. And important thing to remember, I'll go back up here. Uh, this is very important to remember, is what I started out talking about, and that would be so they can create addictions. They can make your addictions worse. They can loop patterns they can make you laugh. Addictive pathways are described as a pleasure reward system which can spiral out of control. This is useful for silent assassinations where years are the order of magnitude of time desired for targets' early termination to amplify self-destructive urges and behaviors like smoking or alcoholism. So we need to be aware if we're engaging in smoking or alcoholism or anything like that, and try to ask ourselves, are they doing this to make me end my life earlier? Am I killing myself? Am I going too far drinking alcohol? Am I going too far smoking, etc., etc.? So anyway, I hope this helps some people. Like I said, next week we will start off with let me see what I done forgot. I think context switching. Yeah, context switching will start next week. Remember, hollyspunk@gmail.com. Uh, uh, if you want to do an interview. Um, also, I'll put my PayPal and Cash App in the link if you want to help out. I don't ask that often, but remember, I pay $16 a month for Zoom just to do interviews. And I do this pretty much for uh, to help everybody and stuff like that. So I am self-sufficient. I do try to avoid asking for money. But if you would like to support, I will put my PayPal in. I haven't done it in a couple months, so I'm going to put it in the description and my Cash App in the description. God bless all targeted individuals.